23 years. We are non.
Hello and welcome to tonight's episode of Café con Cas. Thank you for joining me today. You've noticed that through these 3 episodes, my cold has gotten better. So I'm hoping for less sniffles. So far so good. So I'm very, very happy to be here. Happy Veterans Day. I'm thrilled. I actually was posting on Facebook this morning. I'm thrilled to support veterans. I'm thrilled to honor the veterans that are within my family. And it's just been a really beautiful day. One of my aunts posted on her Facebook this gorgeous picture of her and her service of the Army, which meant a lot for me historically, because I remember calling her on September 11th, asking her, oh my gosh, are you going to Iraq? I'm freaking out. So kind of looking at the history of the world and how things have changed then, it's really powerful. And then also, my grandfather fought in the war, and I wanted to tell you a little bit more of that. The war that I'm referring to is the Korean War, and before I tell you about the Puerto Ricans' involvement in the Korean War, which is a really unique experience, I actually wanted to start with this little clip in honor of my mother. Let's just load this up right here. And then we're going to do, our weekly emotional check-in. So let me just pull up this clip. It is from my favorite, my mother and I share this musical. It's one of our favorites. It's West Side Story from 1961. I think it gives a really good cultural context of kind of just observing my grandfather's service in the war, what it meant for Puerto Ricans to fight in the war. And also just to bring it to a real perspective, because usually on Thanksgiving and Christmas we're singing this song, I love to be in America. So I'm just going to play this for you so you can kind of get in the mood of what I'm going to address next in regards to healing and diversity. So let's get this started. Hold on.
Girls here are free to have fun. She is in America now.
Puerto Rico is in America now.
Sometimes I don't know which is thicker, your skull or your accent.
Oh. Vámonos, muchachos.
Let them wait. Is Maria all right?
I should be so all right.
It will not happen again. Pepe Indio. After tonight, things will be settled.
First settle your stomach.
Never mind my stomach.
Well, I mind your nose and your head broken.
Broken? Sure. They use Maria for an excuse to start World War III.
It is more than that.
More than what? She was only dancing.
With an American. It was really a Polak.
Says they speak.
You are not so cute.
That Tony is.
And he works.
A delivery boy?
And what are you?
An assistant.
See, and Gino makes half of what the Polak makes.
Oh,
The Polak
here
is an
comes the
American.
whole commercial.
Hey, your mother's a
Pole,
Pole,
your father's a Swede,
but
you were born here, that's all that you need. You are an American. But us, foreigners.
Lies! Hey, but it's true! When I think of how I thought it would be for us here, we came like children, believing,
Trusting with our hearts open. With our arms open.
You came with your mouth open.
You did speak and you go back in handcuffs.
I'm going back in a Cadillac. Air conditioned, built-in bar.
Telephone.
And television.
Compatible cola. If you had all that here, why would you want to go back to Puerto Rico?
Oh, even if you didn't have all that here, why would you want to go back to Puerto Rico?
it's so good here.
It's so good there. We had nothing.
We still have nothing, only more expensive. Anita, Josefina,
No, it's
Beatrice
plain
del
Anita
Carmen,
now.
Margarita,
You leave me alone. At least I let... Once an immigrant, always an immigrant.
Hey, look, instead of a shampoo, she's been brainwashed.
Stop it.
She was given to Puerto Rico, and now she's queer for Uncle Sam.
Oh, no. That's not true.
Puerto Rico, my heart's devotion, let it sink back in the ocean. Always the hurricanes blowing, always the population growing, and the money owing, and the
sunlight streaming and the natives steaming. I like the island Manhattan.
I know you do.
Smoke on your pipe and put that in.
I like to be in America. Okay, by me in America. Everything free in America.
For a small fee in America.
So I hope you enjoyed that clip of a popular musical called West Side Story, which I think, besides the modern version of In the Heights, gives a really interesting cultural look into Puerto Rican migration. And I think it brings up a lot of themes that, my gosh, I still think about and feel today, but I am definitely proud to be in America. So let's go ahead and do our weekly emotional check-in. Let's do my favorite thing, which is transfer to the doc cam. So, having watched that and actually feeling prepared and exchanging information with my aunts on Facebook who are in Florida and Puerto Rico, I'm feeling really great. I'm feeling happy, and I'm also feeling confident because, if you know where you come from, it's usually easier to know where you're going. And in the words of my best friend, Emily, having roots with wings is a really beautiful thing. So I feel that with both the island of Puerto Rico and the island of Manhattan, because that's where my parents came through to get to New York. And I am native to that area and happily have been here in Massachusetts since about 1998. So let's look at what else is going on. Okay, so I'm not sure if there's enough emotions. I am slightly exhausted, slightly hysterical, ecstatic. These two kind of are two sides of the same coin, but I'm studying for an exam on Wednesday in addition to working. So time management is definitely a huge factor right now. And overall, I'm really feeling hopeful. I'm really feeling hopeful because there are a lot of resources that I've been learning about, and in studying for this exam, I actually have been able to memorize some things, which is actually difficult for my brain. I actually use colors and associations and different ways of organizing my notes to trick my brain into memorizing. But other than that, I'm really hopeful because what I was learning a lot is about, the difference between consumers and citizens, and being that we consume a lot of news, but something that's really incredible about being here at CCTV is that I can respond as a citizen to some of the things that I see around me. And I also wanted to share that I don't have my cup of coffee with me today. I had enough during the day, but actually Wayne, who's in the control room, went out for a cup of coffee right before. So it's Café con Cas y Wayne también. So I'm really excited about that. And I wanted to show one more thing that I was really excited about that's within the Cambridge community. And it's something that means a lot to me because I pass it in my days at Harvard. And I wanted to show you, it's the Spare Change newspaper. So the Spare Change newspaper is an incredible, powerful tool for the Cambridge community. Essentially, the Spare Change newspaper, so each vendor, so the gentleman that you see, I want to say mostly gentlemen because I actually have not encountered a female in Harvard Square. It doesn't mean that there aren't. However, it's just what I see, my eyes, in my commute through Cambridge. So each vendor pays 35 cents for each copy of the paper, then sells it on the street for $1 and makes a 65-cent profit for each newspaper sold. It's a really beautiful paper, and I'm actually going to just pull up the computer and go onto the Wikipedia page, and you can see here that the paper was started in Boston in 1992. The brainchild of Tim Hobson enlisted the aid of 12 other homeless people and one housed advocate. Interesting use of language here, homeless and housed advocate. I'm not sure what that means, if that's indicating that he was homeless and now is an advocate in a house, or maybe something. I hope maybe I can ask Tim himself one day. So it was on the model, it was based on the Homeless Empowerment Project to found real change in Seattle, and modeled after that. And here's the cover page of the premier Spare Change News, which I think is really beautiful. This looks like an artist. I see Beantown Streetscapes and Nightmare in Portland. I'm not sure what that's about. So that's a little preview of the history of the Spare Change newspaper. And now to look at the, let's take, yeah, I like that shot. Okay, so let's take a little bit of a look at one of the poems that I thought was striking, because I did buy the Spare Change newspaper. This, however, is last week's edition. So Reiji Win writes in the poetry section, which I read a lot, called Simply Complicated. Life is complicated without embracing the ignorance. Life is simple with embracing your heart. Life is what? Why should it be simple or complicated? Is it that life is simply happy? And is it complicated? Is it a complicated life the sad life? Happiness and sadness are inside of us because we aren't happy with what we have, because we are always looking for something more, because we don't appreciate what we have. All of us are self-centered. Our life is governed by little issues. We don't realize the big picture. It is never late to change our habits. Together, let's pledge to be happy. Let's pledge to enjoy life the way we have, and let's pledge to follow the life that we currently have. I absolutely loved that piece of poetry from the Spare Change newspaper and wanted to thank Reggie Wynn for writing that, and also Zachary Boss, who's the founder of Anvil Press, recording street scenes for many years in Cambridge. So this was really great because you're studying an exam about the New York Times, Murdoch, huge organizations addressing the issues that limited resources in the newsroom are causing journalists to kind of rapid fire and not check their facts. So what better way to check facts than through your local news? And this paper is definitely a great indication of local news. There was a great feature by the founder of the paper himself in regards to the government shutdown. So I love just getting these bits of information, and it's really hard because there's so much information out there. To really pick and choose and to really take the time to process that as a consumer and say, what did I just look at? What's going on here? Which again is why I strongly suggest you do kind of emotional check-in after hours and hours and hours, perhaps on your computer or on your Facebook news feed. So on the topic of news and local news, I wanted to express, as a local Puerto Rican American or American Puerto Rican, I like to kind of flip the script a little bit. I wanted to just bring up something that was really interesting to me, and also prompted by the experience of my own grandfather. So growing up, I would visit my grandparents, and I always noticed there was this beautiful not black and white, but sepia-toned color pictures of them from the war, except of all of the stories that I heard from my grandparents, all of the stories that especially I heard from my grandfathers, who were very, very talkative people. There we go. Of all of the, talks with them, they never talked about their involvement with the war. So in my grandfather's death in October of 2013, this year, I was, at my grandfather's house. I was reciting prayers in Spanish. I was attending events where the pastor vení para hablar con la gente allá en Guayanilla, which fue un privilegio porque the pastor doesn't give that type of service all the time at the funeral home. It was very much an honor, very much, the coming together of different spiritualities under, the umbrella of the church. So essentially, that happened, then all this family stuff happened, and then I we were at the cemetery, and there was a bugle. I don't know the specific name for it, but there was a way to honor that he was a veteran of the Korean War. And it was very, very interesting because I know my grandfather always lived in Puerto Rico. So it's very interesting that in his burial, the soldiers came to fold the Puerto Rican flag, and it was a very moving experience for some of my relatives. And it was at that moment, I just wanted to sing God Bless America. It was a very interesting visceral reaction. I had kind of that music playing in my head. Puerto Rico is a Commonwealth of the United States, and as you saw from the West Side Story, there's an interesting relationship with Puerto Ricans and Puerto Ricans who come here and Puerto Ricans who are born here. So that's a topic that I like to explore that has both the healing aspects of it and also the diverse aspects of it, because, we really need to, not need, but in order to have dialogue, it's really important that, you are confident enough that you can trust this other individual to kind of play different ideas. I know that for myself, especially growing up here in the States, it took a while to really understand my own identity within the Puerto Rican USA label. So I wanted to go over again to the computer. I'm going to be dating myself, but I did own Encyclopedia Britannica when it came out, and also the CD version. So I'm just going to use Wikipedia. We're going to go over to the computer right now. And hold on one second. Let's go. Yes, there you go. All right, so we're going to go over to the computer right now. And what I did, having had this conversation with my grandparents, and especially having seen my contemporary relative, my Didi, my Aunt Rose, talk about her service in the war, I wanted to go a little bit into Puerto Ricans in the war. And for some reason, when I Googled Puerto Ricans and the Korean War, what I got is this Wikipedia article of the list of Puerto Ricans actually missing in action in the Korean War. So basically you can see here, there were 61,000 Puerto Ricans who served in the Korean War, most of them who were volunteers. A total of 121 Puerto Rican soldiers were missing in action, which is really interesting. And then for a background, it was actually through a war that Puerto Ricans were given a special status with the Americans. It's the 1898 Treaty of Paris, which concluded the Spanish-American War, which became that it was in United States territory. And then Congress enacted the Jones-Shafroth Act, who gave Puerto Ricans American citizenships with certain limitations. And this is what very striking to me. The limitations is that Puerto Ricans cannot vote for the president. So there was some tension here in looking at, okay, so my grandfather fought in this war. He has, he's not allowed to vote in presidential elections, but because of a war, and this is obviously Veterans Day, so I'm talking informationally about the history of the war. Because of the war, Puerto Ricans have participated in every single conflict involving the United States from World War I onward. This to me is just a very, very interesting fact. And sometimes when I talk about Puerto Rico, I say I'm Puerto Rican, the first thing people say to me, well, it's like a statehood thing, right? And I think I like to focus more on those micro moments in history where you really start to understand that, and I'm pulling up a picture of Puerto Rico, one of my favorite, as I explain this to you. But it's those little micro moments that really make me think, what can we learn about the relationships between the two? Because if we just look at it in a very black and white way, if we just look at things in a very black and white way, we're not really getting a lot of information that we need, because and I know that life is a lot more complicated than that. There's one side to story, two sides, and three sides. So I'm just going to actually show you this really beautiful picture, because every time I talk about something political, not political, but I talk about perhaps events in history that do have political weight, but also mean something personally, I like to ground. So this is a great way for me to ground, and that's with the ocean. And I've always loved the ocean. And this is a beautiful shot. This is a really special place in Puerto Rico. There's a pirate cove on the side of here. This is a place that I spent a lot of time with my mother during my trip, and also, basically every day. So I just wanted to look at that. And I also wanted to transition with that thought that, we know about soldiers returning from the war. However, something that citizens and something that family members also deal with are the shock from the war. Initial shocks, including PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And what I find really beautiful about the image of the water, not just looking at it, but truly understanding it, is that emotions are like the ocean, and they ebb and flow. And sometimes when they're intense, you can feel like you're caught in a riptide. But in actuality, you know, the wave is going to pass. And in actuality, life is as vast as the ocean that connects you to different continents. So that was a really, really beautiful image for me that I really appreciate and love. And something else that also happened in regards to the news recently that I thought was related to the issue of post-traumatic stress disorder, which I want to actually share with the audience on the National Association for Mental Health. And I actually want to show you this. The definition of trauma is that it's like, let's see, though it may seem like a relatively simple concept, trauma, a powerful experience that may have long-lasting effects, has not always been defined the same. Scientists continue to study experience and trauma in hopes of finding better treatments. One particular kind of trauma is known as post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's very interesting because it goes on to say, PTSD can affect different people, from survivors of rape and survivors of natural disasters to military service men and women. So just from the news and just from addressing Veterans Day, I wanted to address Veterans Day in 3 different ways, again, in the name of healing, arts, and diversity. One, healing. I hope and my intention and prayers for soldiers coming home is to come home with no shame and to communicate with their loved ones. And B, my hope is that if you are experiencing symptoms of PTSD, of course, consult a professional for a diagnosis, but also have the courage to talk to someone else, or even just inquire, make an inquiry. I know in Puerto Rico, I passed a lot of veterans associations. They have a lot of resources, and there are a plethora of people who are really, really, really dedicated to helping soldiers who come back from war with post-traumatic stresses from combat, from witnessing a dead one, a comrade dying in front of them, from a variety of things. And to percolate the intellectual community as well. And also, if you as a survivor or a citizen or a brother or a mother or sister were interested in kind of getting to the, you know, a study from the study perspective of PTSD, I wanted to recommend to the audience this following book. It's called Trauma and Recovery. It's by Judith Herman, MD, and she talks about the aftermath of violence from domestic abuse to political terror. Political terror is the part of the spectrum that involves, you know, torture, trigger alert. I'm going to say trigger alert. It involves, you know, serious human rights violations, but also captivity is for domestic violence, and also for soldiers who are simply in shock. And I wanted to also read from this book, which is really powerful. It talks about how in 1918 there was a treatise called Hysterical Disorders of Warfare. This particular British psychologist, Louis Yealand, advocated a treatment based on shaming, threats, and punishment. If you were a kid who got shamed, stress, or punishment, or even an adult who was shamed by a boss or a bully, you can definitely relate to the fact that this is inhumane and does not work. Shaming is something that we shouldn't be doing. And this was also in response to a soldier's declaration that was written in 1970. And as Judith Herman writes, it reads like a contemporary anti-war manifesto. And I wanted to address Veterans Day in a way that, you know, appreciating the service and also recognizing that we've come a really long way in treating individuals who suffer from PTSD. And even recently, I was talking to a friend of mine, and time out. This is a digital mistake, and I'm going to have the courage to say it. I wasn't talking to a friend of mine. A story came up on my Facebook newsfeed from an acquaintance, a friend of a friend whose party I went to, who hosts readings. He posted something, and that's where I got the information. So I just kind of wanted to self-correct myself in the name of, you know, broadcasting this show. And it talks about, I'll just bring this up for you guys. It's really fascinating to me. But yeah, it talks about right here the issues of, sorry, 1 second. Having some problems here. Okay. There we go. Okay, great. Sorry about that. Okay, so it's called Comfort Food. No one brings dinner when your daughter is an addict. And what this article ended up doing on my newsfeed actually turned into a conversation about compassionate recovery from mental illness. Now, this is talking about someone with an addiction. However, in the realm of psychiatry, there's a lot of, I got 2 minutes, there's a lot of overlap between the two. So I thought this was really powerful. And I thought that this was a kind of a great way to introduce the audience to some dialogue that was in play. And I also had a personal moment with this. And what happened was I had made a remark on bringing up the dialogue. Someone else made a remark that it's an illness. Then this dialogue ensued. And there are really people passionate on both sides. And I think on both sides of the argument, everybody had a point of view. And the point to this friend who actually came out with his diagnosis of PTSD was that he wasn't there to tell people what medication to be on. He wasn't there to tell people in an authoritative way anything, but the fact that he himself suffers from this, and he was overjoyed that there was actually some type of discussion surrounding the issue. And I was also overjoyed as well. So that's just really, really powerful. And I can't believe I'm running out of time. This happens, but I've been told by community programmers and also our intern that's a really good thing. So I wanted to segue to a video, but I'm actually just going to kind of check in with myself. I'm going to just like take a deep breath. Talking about trauma is really intense, and talking about veterans is intense because obviously we have different views of the war, different views of why we go to war. I want to respect different opinions and bring you more facts. And I think that's, what I feel really good about doing here. And I feel really good about just saying, gracias papiquito, titiros para tu servicio, gracias por todo. And to my grandfather, Papa Fradera, and just to say, thank you, and healing, arts, diversity, find the joy in